to celebrating the stories of our elders at the Evelyn Rubenstein Jewish Community Center. My name is Tayyba Kanwal. I'm Inprint Director of Workshops and Community Engagement. And with me here are my lovely colleagues, Rich Levy, our Executive Director, and Krupa Parikh, our Associate Director, who have championed and managed this program for years. So it's a joy to be carrying this on. Also with us are Inprint instructors Anna Barr and Bevan O'Connor, who many of you know and see every week. So great to have them here. Our talented readers today have been participants in the Inprint Senior Memoir Workshop, led by Anna Barr at the J, from spring 2024 through fall 2024 for the most part, and whose work appears in this lovely anthology you see floating around, and you can probably take a peek later if you haven't seen it already. Thank you for sharing your stories, your wisdom. It is such a joy and honor to be here with you today. If you don't know Inprint yet, we're Houston's premier literary arts nonprofit organization, and Inprint has been conducting workshops like this one at various community senior centers for about 28 years now in Houston. This particular one at the J has been running for more than 20 years. And the success of this workshop has helped us start several others around the city of Houston, so that we now have 6 workshops going, 2 right here at the J, and 4 more at other senior centers, Harris County Precinct 1 senior centers. And those are in their second semester now, per se, so they've really worked out. Inprint is deeply grateful to the Samuels Family Foundation and Bobbi Samuels for their generous underwriting support since 1996 of the Inprint Senior Memoir Workshops at the Evelyn Rubenstein Jewish Community Center in Houston. These senior memoir workshops are also supported by Robin Angley and Miles Smith. And Inprint receives underwriting support from the Jerry C. Deering Foundation, from Houston Endowment, the City of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance, and the Texas Commission on the Arts. And we would also like to thank a very special person, Judy Weil, from the J, for helping us administer these workshops. And our special thanks to Houston writer, University of Houston Creative Writing Program graduate student, Inprint Jesse H. and Mary Gibbs Jones Fellow, and most recently the Inprint Marion Bartholomew Prize in Creative Writing winner, Anna Barr, for leading this workshop. She's led it with dedication and love. You've been with her for over a year now, and if I may take a moment to ask you to silence your phones, because we always need that moment. And I'd like to invite Anna for a few words about this reading and our wonderful readers.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
We'll work with that. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm so pleased to be introducing these lovely readers and to have their work be recognized publicly as it so deserves to be. I'll just read the letter that I wrote in the anthology, and then I'll invite the first reader up. It has been my favorite thing to spend a couple hours at the writing table each week with you these past months. Many times, almost every time, I have felt that just by being in that room with you and your stories, sometimes joyous, sometimes difficult to tell, always generous stories, we have experienced a kind of being together, which is increasingly rare and increasingly important. Now, I don't want you all in the audience thinking that all we did in memoir class was meditate, cry, and write until our pens ran out of ink or our iPads died, though we did do quite a bit of all of this. We also giggled, goofed off, ate cookies, read and sometimes dissed published pieces, yours are always better, and got to know each other quite well. It was in the generative energy between the crying and the cookie eating that our memoir workshop, and as a result, a community has been built. We have been lucky to find that in each other. I have been lucky to spend time with your memories and perspectives in your pieces each week. I have learned far more than I have taught. This is quantifiably actually true. I am different now than when I started. So to my students, thank you so much for embarking on the intrepid journey of self-reflection and vulnerability that is memoir, and for doing all the hard, emotional, and craft work that comes with it. Thank you for reading and engaging with the work of your peers each week. And to the audience, I'm so glad to introduce the 11 memoirs selected for this year's anthology. These are true stories, well told, and we are so lucky to be reading them. So thank you very much. And who's up first? Marlene. Please welcome Marlene Shields to the stage.
I want to dedicate this reading to my grandchildren. Fasten your seatbelts. If I weren't such a rule follower, I never would have wet my pants. The teacher was late returning to class after lunch, so we first graders started praying the Angelus without her. We stood by our wooden desks in neat rows of 5 and started with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, followed by the prayer, the angel of the Lord declared unto Mary. That's when it happened. I had no one to ask permission to go to the bathroom, so while standing next to my desk, I felt the warm, yellow urine run down my leg, into my socks and shoes, puddling onto the floor. I just kept praying the Angelus, hoping the stream would stop, but it didn't. After the prayer, I simply sat down at my desk. No one said a word. We were not allowed to talk in class, but everyone was staring at me. As soon as the teacher returned, another first grader went to her and ratted me out. Mrs. Cornyn called me to the front of the room where she sat behind her desk writing a note for me to take to the principal's office. I took the note, walked across the front of the room in shame, and out the door. I had to walk down 4 concrete steps to the asphalt walkway leading from the shacks, our temporary classrooms, on the edge of the football field, across the parking lot to the main building in the quadrangle. There, the secretary took the note, read it, and called Jim the custodian. Then she called my mother. But the shame didn't end there. When my mom brought fresh clothes for me, she also brought my 4-year-old sister Marianne with her, who promptly sang in her sing-song voice, Marlene wet her pants, over and over until Mother made her stop. It was bad enough having my mother washing my leg and changing my clothes for me in the principal's office restroom, but having my baby sister there taunting me was too much. It happened 67 years ago, but I can still remember every detail of that humiliation. Had I been older, I hope I would have used my common sense and figured out the consequences of staying in the classroom. Rules be damned, but at age 6, I didn't want to get into trouble. I'm still that 6-year-old little girl when it comes to breaking rules. I still don't want to get into trouble. On the golf course, I stay on the cart path, even when cutting across the fairway is expeditious. That's the course superintendent's rule. While driving, I always use my blinker and never change lanes in the middle of an intersection. That's the traffic rule enforced by the police. When I set the table, I always put the forks on the left and the knives and the spoons on the right, and the water goblet at the knife point. That was my mother's rule. I water pick, brush, and floss every day before putting in my retainers without fail. That's the dentist rule. I don't want a confrontation, or a fine, or a lecture, or a cavity. I like order and rules. I like diagramming sentences and labeling parts of speech. Grammar is like an algebraic equation where x equals x, and every word has its place rule. I was an English teacher, the rule followers of all rule followers in high school. Rules make me have order in what I can control in my life. I had rules when raising my children: regular bedtime, beds made before school, homework finished before TV, home-cooked dinners together. This, however, doesn't mean I'm not flexible. I don't mind bending the rules when the situation dictates, unlike when I was 6. Okay, so sometimes I eat dessert for dinner or go to bed with my makeup still on, but these are self-imposed rules, aren't they? I try not to care if I get into trouble for breaking one, but it's hard. Even in old age, we care what people think. Bobbi Samuels.
nighttime visitor. His teeth were sharp and long. He hissed angrily at me when I moved close to him. Clearly frightened, he didn't know how to make me go away. Weren't they supposed to play dead when they're threatened, I wondered? If he did that, I might gather the nerve to grab him, as the wildlife rescue person on the phone had suggested. I had found a cardboard box in which to put him if I could grab him. But where could I find the thick leather gloves that the wildlife expert suggested I wear for capturing him? Why do those front teeth look so sharp and long? He hissed at me again, and again I took 2 steps backward. How was I going to get this very frightened possum out of my house? I had just returned home after a weekend trip to Arizona. My husband Vic had a victory packaging meeting outside of Phoenix, and I went along for the weekend. He was continuing his meetings for several days, and I had to get back to Houston to teach classes on Monday afternoon. In the week before we left home, I had noticed a few strange things in our house. One morning, an apple in a bowl of fruit on the kitchen table had been partially eaten and was still sitting there. Another morning, a straw basket, usually on top of the kitchen cabinets, was on the floor. I wondered if some critter had found its way into my house. So when I left town, I told my son's friend Wayne, who was coming by to take care of the dog and cats, keep an eye out for unusual events. When my plane landed in Houston that night, I called Wayne to tell him I was on my way home and to check that everything had gone okay while I was gone. No real problem, Wayne said, although I did notice a hat from one of the hooks near the back door was on the floor yesterday. I'm not sure why it fell. Clearly the strange events had continued. I entered the house and soon went up to my office to organize some papers I needed for my work the following day. I sat down at my desk. There on the windowsill of my office, across the large desk from me, was the critter I had suspected was living in my house. It was one of the neighborhood possums. We stared at each other. His lips curled a little as he showed me his big teeth. I had seen possums outside at times eating cat food at my back door or walking in the yard. I always thought they were cute in a funny way, but I didn't like seeing one in my office about 5 feet away from me hissing and baring his teeth. He was obviously unhappy to see me sitting so close to him, but I wasn't really afraid. Animals never frightened me. At one time in my life, I thought I might be a veterinarian. It was only organic chemistry that frightened me away from that career. I generally respect and appreciate all kinds of animals as deserving of their place in the world. I don't think of animals as threatening unless they're threatened by something I do. I stayed still at my desk as I grabbed my phone and called Wayne. I discovered who's in my house, I said quietly. He's sitting on the windowsill across from me. Don't do anything, I'll be there right away. Wayne wanted to protect me. I didn't think I needed protection, but I was happy to have Wayne come on over to help me get this critter out of my house. He didn't want to be there, and I didn't want him there. The next reader is Claire Poole.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobbi. My piece is called Homecoming. Can you hear me? Okay. Homecoming. Coming back from the hospital after having a stroke, they were all there to greet me. My husband, who drove me home, my oldest daughter, and son-in-law who moved back in with us, and my youngest daughter, who had been home since getting laid off from both of her jobs in LA due to the pandemic. I was so excited about being home. The familiarity of it, the security of it, enveloped by my books, photographs, and tchotchkes I had collected from years past and my bed, my blessed bed, firm but comfortable, not like the thin hospital mattresses. Now I could lay my head down on the feather pillow I bought in New York City decades ago. My husband helped me out of the car with my vibrant blue cane, which has special three-prong grips on the bottom, better than the cheap gray standard issue one received in rehab. Walking up to our front steps, I saw our crocus stoop, now equipped with handrails. I remember walking through our front door, greeted as usual by two barking dogs. Rocky's eyes brightened and he wagged his tail, clearly happy to see me. But Danny, who was really my dog, he followed me everywhere, ran away and hid under the table beside the couch. My oldest daughter tried to call Danny out, but he ignored her. I don't know if he had forgotten me or was angry at me for leaving him, or he was scared of my game, or perhaps even more frightening, he thought I was dead. Over the 5 weeks I was in the hospital, Danny had already latched onto my daughter. I felt small and insignificant in her world. I made my way to the sofa and carefully eased myself down, as the therapist taught me, with the vague sense that this was no longer my home. It seemed unfamiliar somehow, with a feeling of insecurity lurking around each and every corner. What if I tripped on a rug, or a dog, or bumped a corner of the coffee table, or lost my balance, bringing me down? I watched at the faces of my loved ones, swirled all around me. Are you hungry, thirsty, wants to watch some TV? It was almost too much to bear. I had the feeling, which would be repeated again and again, that I was watching the world all around me without me in it. Nothing was the same. I was not the same. Thank you.
Next we have Lynn Morstead.
Why are you putting all this personal stuff out there for everyone to read? My best friend since forever asked me after I started my retirement blog. Was she accusing me of something? Instead of asking why she was asking, I raised my defenses, but nothing constructive to offer. Platitudes like challenging myself and needing intellectual stimulus dribbled out of my mouth. Truthfully, it was simply something I could not do. I just didn't know how to explain that. Something deep in my soul demanded that I put myself on a steady diet of daily meditation, spiritual reflection, and journaling. I needed to initiate a churning in my being that precipitated forward movement into my new world. I was compelled to capture and preserve the little bubbles of insight that would inevitably percolate through this repeated rigor. The blog post seemed like a great vessel for that. I recently read that writing is the best instrument for wresting meaning from our transient lives. Hallelujah, that's it, I shouted into my quiet meditation space early one morning after skimming Maria Popova's Easy, The Marginalian. I'm not just tapping into some fleeting insight, but I'm extracting juice from it. That would have been a better response. The Marginalian article went on. It is the best means we have of transmuting that which grows or gnaws at us into something that nourishes. Yes, again, that's what she said. I had a need for the sense I was making of my world to be shared with others so that they too might be nourished. Online comments to the blog and in-person responses were gratifying. I had made sense of some of their confusion too. It was a new reward based on a different currency, one that led to a greater sense of personal mastery and self-knowing rather than promotions and salary treatment. The retirement blog came to a natural conclusion as the topics morphed into life beyond my transition to a new rhythm. I had worked my way through the angst around creating a new purpose, organizing my open days, how much is too much volunteering, and what is vacation about when you're permanently on vacation? All the gold had been extracted, time to move on. An appetite for something more rigorous than daily journaling had been awakened. A few bursts of energy with other blog topics didn't have the same staying power. Writing essays about life's amusing happenings didn't have the gravitas to hook me in for very long. Then one day, I stumbled across an imprint memoir anthology reading at the Ensemble Theater. I was enchanted. I wanted in on this. The stories read by class participants reeled me in, and I signed up for the next class I could find. Here I am now, a regular participant of the Imprint Senior Memoir class, where I've confirmed what Maria Popova of the Marginalian fame says about writing being the best instrument I have for metabolizing my experience and clarifying my own mind in such a way that I'm no longer captive to it. The weekly excavations into memories, feelings, old notes and artifacts defining my life have opened up layer upon layer of enrichment. New gold. I've played on playgrounds of my past, swinging to thrilling new heights, revisited scenes of yesteryear, repainting backdrops and imagining script variations, traveled to the other side of life to uncover motivations and intentions of those who have passed on before telling their stories. I'm filling in the gaps and dabbling in the mystery of the patchwork quilt that is my life. There's still plenty of gold in them there hills.
Next, we will welcome Thelma Zirkelbach up here. I'll hold your mic. Do you want to sit in this chair? It's up to you.
I'm sitting for this. I have spinal stenosis right now, so I can't stand very long. This is rainy days. My mother was nervous about many things. Rain was one of her top 3. She was convinced that if we went out in the rain, we would catch colds. On rainy days in early childhood, I would peer out the screen door and watch raindrops splatter on our front porch. As they plopped down one after another, I imagined they'd look like soldiers marching. Mother thought that was a cute concept, but she never allowed me to join their parade. Having listened to her read Robert Louis Stevenson's A Child Garden of Verses, I believed it rained everywhere at once. The rain is raining all around. It falls on field and tree. It falls on the umbrellas here and on the ships at sea. I pictured the raindrops falling on the ships at sea. There, I suppose they would be sailors. Family lore has it that the summer I was born, Austin, Texas suffered a flood when the Colorado River overflowed its banks. Tap water was suspect, and my father had to stand in long lines to get water from my bottles from the artesian well on Capitol grounds. I often picture him, a skinny man in shirt sleeves, sweating in the Texas heat, but determined to stay until he got the precious water. Given my history, it's not surprising that rain and floods have been among the most memorable events in my life. I'm going to skip the section where I wrote a scene from a romance novel for Harlequin. Sorry, Marlene's grandchildren, I'm not doing this one. I'm going to lose my fan club from last time. This is Hurricane Alicia. On August 17th, 1983, we hear ominous weather reports. Hurricane Alicia is heading this way. Oh, don't worry about the forecast, I tell a colleague who has recently moved here from Kansas City. They're always predicting hurricanes, but they never hit Houston. I never say never. At 2 a.m. the next morning, we wake to the sound of howling wind. I'm terrified. Typically, my husband Ralph is not. As we walk down the hall, I glance up at the skylights. Rain pelts against the glass, and wind whirls leaves around like the spin cycle in a washing machine. I grab his hand and hold tight. The family room fills. Lori, my daughter, and her husband and a friend who drove up with them from Galveston. Brian and a buddy who came by last night and stayed. Michael, whose plans to drive to Austin today, is dashed. We huddle together while the wind groans and shrieks outside. A branch from our backyard fig tree crashes to the ground. Another branch hurtles toward our roof. The power is off, so is the phone. We have no connection to the outside world. In the early afternoon, as the eye drifts over, Ralph and I slip outside. It's eerily quiet. The world holds its breath, waiting for the next storm's second act. As the winds pick up, we slip back into the house. Finally, Alicia's fury ebbs. We salvage hot dogs from the fridge, cook them in the fireplace, and enjoy our makeshift dinner. We've survived. The next reader is Helen Wils.
Okay, I too will skip around, so if you're trying to follow in the book, there are certain paragraphs left out. This is called Actuarially Speaking. Actuarially speaking, I said, trying to convince my husband it was time to sell our house, it is likely that you will predecease me. I can't manage this house without you. Admittedly, this is not a great way to begin a conversation. Actuarially speaking, he replied, you're probably right. What would you do if I predeceased you? I'd stop at a realtor's office on the way home from the cemetery. Leonard is 14 years older than I. We almost didn't marry because he feared our age difference would haunt us in later years. It doesn't seem to matter now, but what about later, he asked. What about later? What about later? What if I want to retire and you're in the middle of a career? What if I'm infirm? What if I have dementia? We'll work it out, I said. And we do. Leonard retired at 63. I was 49 at the time and worked another 20 years. I had no interest in retiring. He took care of the house, did the grocery shopping, oversaw the home repairs, home remodeling, construction of a beach house. He also gave me good advice. If you're going to worry about what you'll do the day after you retire, keep working. One day, I realized I was not worried about the day after. I handed in my resignation, I mentioned. It's effective 6 months from now. I have two things to say to you. What? Find your own stuff to do. I'm not the entertainment committee. Neither am I your IT person nor your secretary. Figure it out. Then, a year and a half ago, Leonard slipped exiting the shower, resulting in a high ankle sprain and a fractured tibia. This is what happens to a 30-year-old football player, not guys of 94, the surgeon remarked. What were you doing? Running for a pass. What do you think I was doing? Post-surgery, the surgeon told us that the goal was to get Leonard in the condition he was prior to the day of the accident. How about a few years prior to the accident, I inquired. Papa Leonard, said Gila, our middle grandchild, you promised you'd walk me down the aisle on my wedding day. I want you next to me. I'm not going to push your wheelchair. A year later, he kept his promise and danced with her as well, unaccompanied by the wheelchair or the walking stick. His memory is better than mine. He remembers names and relationships. I don't. He quietly fills me in huge social gatherings. He's a walking encyclopedia, conversant in matters historical and political, financial, business, popular culture, and sports related. He is up to date. How do you know that is my refrain? I was born in 1929, he reminds me. I lived through most of it. A history buff, he remembers World War II battles, which generals were involved, social and political upheavals throughout the 20th century. A few years ago, I asked the history buff if he'd like to go to Antipole, a small village in Belarus, where my father was born and where many of his relatives perished during World War II. He declined. Our granddaughter, Gila, however, was intrigued. May I go with you? Go with her, he said. I'm sure the two of you will have a great time in Belarus. By the way, how do you intend to get money while the two of you are wandering around for 3 weeks? You refuse to use an ATM. Cash and traveler's checks? He laughed. I learned how to use the ATM. Gila texted pictures of our adventures to our grandfather. I don't want to see one more picture of the two of you sitting on a hotel terrace overlooking the Adriatic drinking wine, he texted back. Next picture she sent was the two of us in muddy caving outfits. Leonard has confidence in my ability to arrange trips, handle our finances, taxes, investments, and legal matters, argue with the appraisal district, and make sure the grandchildren are okay. He does not have faith in my technological and certain practical skills that arise during the ordinary course of daily living, or in my case, the lack thereof and related deficiencies. When my phone or desktop fails to respond, he tells me to reboot. What does that mean? Turn it off and turn it on again. Why couldn't he just say that? He rolls his eyes. We need to review our wills, he recently tells his lawyer, who is reading the paper in bed. His lawyer senses panic on the horizon, hers, not his. His lawyer remains silent. She dreads this conversation with her pro bono client. Would you mind telling me whether I am talking to my lawyer or my wife? His wife pulls the blankets over her head. His lawyer knows they must have this discussion. His wife does not want to consider that he might one day leave her permanently. I want to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary, his wife says. You'll be only 102 and I'll be a spry 87-year-old with limited memory. Who will tell me who the guests are if you're not there? I know he was trying to prepare me just in case. A few years ago, I gave him a special anniversary card featuring two skeletons sitting on a sofa holding hands. Love is forever, the card read. I tell him about the William Faulkner short story, A Rose from Emily. After Emily dies, the townspeople discover the corpse of her lover, perhaps her husband, in a locked room, a pillow with an indentation of her head next to his corpse and a single gray hair on the pillow. If you predecease me, I think I'll keep you in the bathtub. We have a very large tub. And if you acquire a boy toy after I'm gone, I'll ask if he wants to meet my husband. He's right there in the bathtub. Actually, wearily speaking, Leonard is as sharp as ever, so I've upped the ante. 120, the same age as Moses when he died.
Thank you, Helen. Our next reader is Susan Evans.
This is very special for me. As far as I can tell, Thelma and Joy in the back there are older in terms of having been a part of this class. So I've done it for about 6 years now and enjoyed these very much. I'm going to start in the middle of my piece because, as everyone who knows me knows, I write too much and too long. So I'll start in the middle, but I want to tell you it's about a special piece of property in the hill country along the Guadalupe River that my grandfather purchased in 1943, and a lot of my writing is about this place. So here we go. Oh, and I talked a lot about as a child how I liked it. That's what I'm skipping. I really considered the rapids to be my special place. I felt like a water princess as long as I wore river shoes to protect my feet from the rocky bottom. By the time we were almost teenagers, my brother preferred the deeper current that flowed past the landing downriver. He didn't venture upriver to the rapids unless he needed minnows to fish with, and so now it was my domain. Even by the cliffs, in the shallow, stagnant water, I could read my books on the tree-crowded shore. Hidden in a shallow cave, I found the top of the cave about 100 feet up, had a slit opening into the sky, which provided enough light to read. What a great secret place, reading in a cozy cave with light from above where no one could see me, made me eager to cross the murky water to lay in repose for a few hours. I just had to check for snakes, crawdads, and itchy water bugs around the inside of the cave. Iridescent dragonflies with their tiny, veined wings flew around as I walked the shallow ripples, only to sweep down and eat pesky mosquitoes and other annoying bugs. I love dragonflies. In the potholes, the dragonflies and the butterflies were happy to perch on my arms. I will swear I made pets of a few who headed back each day. I even used the potholes for a spa. I relaxed while the soothing water hit my body like a water jet around me. Sometimes I washed my hair in the potholes. It was much cleaner than the falls area. The water swirled through rapidly, thus the name rapids, and washed out the silt and the debris, unlike the area that choked up the water near the cliffs. I would have bathed there if I thought I would have had any privacy. I never had privacy with a younger brother. Now at age 74, time and circumstances have changed. I am too old to answer the call of the rapids like I did as a child. My balance has deteriorated, so I let the grandchildren sing without me. I am now too wide, or the potholes are too small. Washing my gray hair in river water is no longer exciting, nor is wading through stagnant water to look for caves I excitedly searched for so many years ago. I sit on the same 80-year-old rock bench wall as I did as a child, facing the rapids some early mornings to read. Sometimes my reading is interrupted by the most wonderful calling of all, the splashing of the white-tailed buck, leading his does and fawns across the shallows from the stark rock cliffs to the verdant green sloping shore of the river. He turns to look at me with a large rack of antlers. He is not afraid, just curious. Then after this momentary pause, he escorts his family to the meadow side of the Guadalupe River so they can casually munch. Some summer afternoons, I see the resident hawk flying low downstream where she keeps her nest on the rapids. I have seen her catch a water snake to snack on. She never flies low near my hammock on the upper ledge of the shore. She soars fast and true upstream over the water to capture her prey on the river. I still sleep on the natural rock porch of the river house in the spring with the open window screens, so the only separation between me and the river are those. I relax and enjoy the various sounds. I don't usually hear the nocturnal creatures and swimming fish, but I always hear the water rushing down the rapids to the waterfall and into the deeper water. This miracle brings me joyous memories from my favorite spot on earth, followed by such peaceful sleep.
Sadly, Joy Lee was not able to make it today, but her story is in the book, so I encourage you to read it. So our next reader will be Denise Zwicker.
Lost. My husband was lost to me. Low energy, anemic participation in our family and social life, scant affection toward me or our 2 children, obviously no sex. I'm too angry with you to have sex, George said. In fact, anger was all he had energy for. I was the cause, somehow, of his angst and failures. You don't respect me, he snarled. It was hard to deny. When we were dating so long ago, he said he loved my optimism and energy. I loved that his answer to almost any proposal I made was, sure. What happened to that friend to many, that successful young salesman, the gentle giant who wasn't ashamed to cry? The one reason I'd hesitated to marry him was his cradle Episcopalian's claim to agnosticism. Frankly, I didn't believe him, and before we'd been married 2 years, he'd joined me at church. Soon, he'd become fully engaged in our Episcopal parish, vestryman, junior warden. He wanted to be a father, especially to be a better father than his own, which was, his words, a pretty low bar. But always, there was a darker side, a side that I, for years, refused to acknowledge. Surely he was just being dramatic, telling me that after a breakup with his high school girlfriend, Panay, had driven his motorcycle to a cliff, intending to careen into oblivion. 2 years married, we heard the phone ringing as we arrived home one night. George hurled open the front door and raced inside to answer. When he heard only a dial tone, he ripped the phone from the wall and smashed his fist through the sheetrock. When we'd argue, he'd charge out of the house, screeching away in his car. He'd return hours later without a word. 3 years married, he had an affair with Panay. My first clue was when he said, "I don't think I love you anymore." Still, we were married. I was in it for the long haul. After he confessed the affair, we saw counselors at our church, attended marriage encounter. I tried hard to forgive him. Forgetting was another matter. Panay would haunt my life for decades. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. After his father died unexpectedly in 1984, George pleaded with me to have children. It took a couple more years for me to agree. I didn't trust him to do his part. We'd seen counselors about that too. And there was Panay, always lurking. After many years, it became clear that he was lost, not just to me, but also to himself. In the next 16 years, 6 therapists and doctors would agree, but George did not. For years, we saw first one, then another marriage counselor. "This is pointless," George would say. "You'd be better off without me. I don't want to be married to you anymore." George was equally lost to our children, Laura and Paul, the children he'd begged me to bear. When Paul was 6 months old in 1991, George voluntarily saw a counselor alone who said the D word for the first time. George was affronted. It was me who was depressed, not him. He asked me to see the counselor, also alone, for a diagnosis. I did. She said, "You're about as far from depressed as possible, especially considering how depressed your husband is." I told him he needs therapy. When I reported her comment, George called me a liar and sank deeper. Anger, headaches, job losses, malaise. I went to classes, support groups, read books about depression, and his next diagnosis, ADHD. Was it the stress of rearing 2 small children? A wife who, after 13 years of coupledom, now had less time for him? Financial worries? Or simply a 17-year marriage slowly going bad? When Laura and Paul were older, they had come to me crying over something hateful he said to them. As preteens, they called me on my cell phone when I was 20 miles away at choir practice. "Come home," they said, both of them in tears. "Daddy's yelling at us and won't stop." He never hit us. Once I hit him. Surely a mere glancing blow on his 6'6", 240-pound frame. He turned and walked away. I was ashamed, but only later when the adrenaline stopped pumping. One spring day, 29 years married, I realized that I didn't love George anymore. Pulling weeds in the back flower bed, I sat back on my heels, stunned.
Hello, mine's also shorter than what's written. Shortened it a bit. I have a slight speech impediment, so I'll try to speak clearly. A timeline of when the sky was falling down. In April 2020, I called my father's New Jersey retirement home and hands him the phone. He's 93 and has just contracted COVID. "Wendy," he half croaks, half whispers, unable to utter more than my 2-syllable name. The entire country is in lockdown, and in 5 days he's gone. I am bereft to do so. In May 2020, my friend Claire Poole suffers an ischemic stroke from a blood clot in her leg. Her family talks via FaceTime. No visitors can enter the hospital. My brother Peter, a physical therapist, also has recent issues with his own motor control, but has written a book on stroke recovery. I order it for Claire. When she finally comes home, bearing brace and cane, I'm reminded how arduous recovery can be. Peter sees several specialists about possible MS. Instead, he tests positive for ALS and is given 1 to 3 years to live. Stephen Poole, Claire's older brother, calls me in November. The COVID uptick has flattened, but Stephen sounds weary. He asks how I am as I hear his daughter wrestling the phone from him. She tells me he's in late stage pancreatic cancer, but wanted to call me. They've begun hospice. I'm at a loss and offer to make a coffee cake that Stephen loved. My sister-in-law, Isla, had been diagnosed with leukemia a year post-recovery from breast cancer and a mastectomy. Like Peter, she's a physical therapist, but after 2 bone marrow transplants, she's confined to a hospital bed. My brother says Isla looks like a concentration camp survivor, all knobby knees and with wasted calves and thighs. Peter claims to be holding steady, but now walks with a cane. He worries about his 2 college-age kids, as both parents have devastating diseases. By December 2021, Winchester Gardens, the New Jersey retirement home, begins allowing visitors. My sister Peggy and I decide to spend Christmas with Mother as people are starting to travel again. She's a difficult woman and is angry that Peter won't be joining us. He FaceTimes us on Christmas Day, but it's a struggle for him to speak as he shakes with palsy. I love you, he mouths to the 3 of us. Peter talks to Peggy the longest, and she listens to him with tears running down her cheeks. An hour later, Mother wants to call Peter back. We refuse, as we know how difficult the call, struggle the call was for him. Peggy and I do our best to distract Mother with good cooking and holiday gifts, but have minimal success. She's 92. In January 2022, Isla calls me. Peter has been hospitalized after being diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome. She suggests I fly out to say goodbye since they'll begin hospice. I book a flight for the following week, but I'm too late. Peter's immune system fatally attacks him while the ALS continues its damage. Isla asks me to call Mother to relay the news. Mother dissolves in tears. Oh no, my Peter, no, please. Isla waits for leukemia's remission to hold Peter's memorial. It's now May 2022. My son and I fly to Cincinnati for the remembrance. Halfway through a video tracing Peter's life from infancy to adulthood, my cell phone rings. It's Winchester Gardens. The staff nurse says Mother has been walking through the hall with no pants on. The nurse got her dressed but warns that she's now incapable of living independently. The retirement home sends her to the hospital to be examined. It turns out Mother has COVID and a UTI, which can cause erratic behavior in the elderly. I plan to visit Mother in New Jersey, but catch COVID when returning to Houston from Cincinnati. So I wait to recover and go in June. My doctor says airports are like Petri dishes. In August, I return again to New Jersey to downsize Mother's apartment. I'll store bits of furniture for her move in the memory care wing. Mother scowls at me, pulling my hair when I lean down to kiss her. She no longer speaks, only grunts. I try to remain magnanimous. The Winchester Gardens clinic staff advises patients. Soon Mother goes into renal failure. When she dies, I press her eyelids closed and feel a quiet relief as I wait for the coroner in an icy cold room. My oldest friend, Karen Porcelli, also lives in Maplewood. I met Karen in 8th grade when my family moved to New Jersey. We've kept in touch intermittently over the years. She assures me she'll help me empty Mother's apartment, a daunting task. The apartment is like a museum filled with books, paintings, jewelry, and Persian carpets from their many years abroad. Karen's husband, George, is an accountant who has done my parents' taxes since they moved to Winchester Gardens. But during my visit in August, George's health suddenly worsens. He's hospitalized and dies. I stay in Mother's apartment to clear the remains of her lifetime alone. Several months later, Karen decides to sell her New Jersey home and move to Houston, where her daughter, an OBGYN, will ultimately practice. I helped Karen settle in during the horrible Houston summer of 2003. One beastly hot day in August, we planned for a trip to H-E-B. While we're sipping margaritas during lunch, she says, "Who would have thought at age 13 that we'd be bracing ourselves for a grocery run at 66? We both begin to giggle."
Let's hear another round of applause for all of our readers. Thank you all so much for being here.